Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, today we're going to dive into a channel we have not explored before, and this one's called Dr. Explained. He's got about 38,000 subscribers, and it looks like the style is very similar to another channel we have done some looks at, which is The Paint Explainer. And it's basically a 7, 8, 9-minute video where they go through a bunch of different things that are all part of the same topic and just kind of rapid fire. And in this case, we're looking at the most powerful weapon of every century. It might be fun to dive in and just talk about a range of topics and how warfare has changed, along with a number of other factors throughout history. The link is in the description, so you can check it out without my commentary, see all the other videos. If you like what you see, consider subscribing to Dr. Explained. Let's dive into this one.
In the 1st century, the Roman pilum was the most powerful weapon. The Roman pilum was a versatile weapon used by the Roman army, consisting of a wooden shaft and an iron head, typically around 2 meters in length. It was designed to bend or break upon impact, making it difficult for the enemy to throw it back. The pilum was thrown in a specific manner to maximize its effectiveness, with the spinning motion increasing its accuracy and force. This made the pilum a deadly and important weapon in Roman warfare. In the second...
So just in talking about these, I'll try to let each one play, and then I'll stop and talk a little bit about it afterwards. I think anybody who studied Roman history understands this was a big deal, and I think they carried several of them. And yeah, it was kind of the first thing you did when you started out, and it was a great way to, number one, maybe inflict some casualties before you came into hand-to-hand combat range, but also to inflict fear on your enemy and kind of disrupt their formation. And all of these weapons, I'm sure we're going to talk about the fact that they only work if you know how to use them. You know, other armies could have had this same weapon, but if it's not used properly and if it's not used as part of a larger strategy and tactic on the battlefield, doesn't matter a whole lot. But absolutely, and I love the fact that this thing was designed in such a way that it couldn't be turned around and used on them. This was like a one-time use weapon.
2nd century, the Roman scorpion was the most powerful weapon. The Roman scorpion was an ancient artillery weapon used by the Roman army, resembling a large crossbow mounted on a tripod or carriage. It was capable of launching bolts or arrows with significant force and accuracy, often used in siege warfare to breach fortifications or in open battles to disrupt enemy formations. In the 3rd century...
Now, you saw those walls, and you might think, well, that didn't really happen in the Roman Empire. But if you go to Italy today, go to Rome, you can see the Aurelian walls outside the city, which date back about 1,700 years. And they are massive. They're thick, and they went up fairly quickly. Obviously, that kind of a weapon's not doing anything against 15, 20-foot thick wall. But on a battlefield, if you're dealing with people who have very primitive defenses or even just shields or something, that's plowing right through that. And again, this inflicts a lot of fear on the enemy when you have these in massive numbers. And this is something you can reload fairly quickly, and you can have a bunch of ammunition available. We don't think too much about artillery being a part of 2nd century warfare, but it definitely was.
The Roman trireme was the most powerful weapon. The Roman trireme was an advanced ancient naval vessel with 3 levels of rowers, enabling remarkable speed and maneuverability. Armed with a bronze ram at the prow, it was a formidable weapon in naval warfare. In the 4th and 5th century, the ballista was the most powerful weapon. The ballista was just like the Roman scorpion, but better and stronger. In the 6th
and isn't this what happens? You take a weapon that has been effective and you say, how can we improve this? Because what happens is, as you're facing off against opponents and you start using weapons, well, then they start figuring out how they defend against that weapon. So then you need to up your game. I was watching something this morning. It was a documentary on the HMS Dreadnought, and they were talking about how once naval weapons started hitting a certain level of advancement, now you have to figure out, how do we make our armor stronger to withstand that gun? Well, then your opponent has to make a bigger, stronger gun to deal with that armor, and then you have to make armor that deals with that, and it just keeps escalating. It's the constant nature of warfare.
In 7th century, the Greek fire was the most powerful weapon. Greek fire was an incendiary weapon used by the Byzantine Empire, particularly in naval warfare. It was a liquid that could be sprayed or hurled at enemy ships, igniting on contact and burning fiercely even on water. The exact composition of Greek fire was a closely guarded secret, but it was said to include a mix of flammable substances like petroleum, sulfur, and quicklime, creating a substance that was difficult to extinguish and highly effective in combat. In the 8th century, the catapult was the most powerful weapon. The catapult was a type of ancient siege engine used for hurling large projectiles at enemy fortifications.
And why are you now going from something that shoots big arrows to something that hurls big rocks? Well, because you're starting to deal with the advent of castles and stronger permanent fortifications. A lot of times at this point, you have city walls, and city walls have been around, for centuries at this point. This is nothing new. They go back thousands of years. But you're dealing with a weapon that can knock big holes in those city walls. Or you start tunneling underneath, and the ancient way of doing, shouldn't say ancient, up until several hundred years ago, the most common thing you did in mining, it wasn't about explosives underneath. It was about you'd build a mine underneath, and then you would just collapse the mine, and that would bring down a section of the wall.
It operated on the principle of stored energy, usually using
Science.
tension, torsion, or gravity to launch its payload. Catapults came in various forms, including the ballista, which was like a giant crossbow, and the onager, which used a sling to launch projectiles. In the 9th century, the Viking axe was the most powerful weapon. The Viking axe...
And obviously, we can quibble about, was that really the most powerful weapon? Wouldn't the catapult still have been more powerful than this? But what he's trying to do is highlight different weapons that we identify with particular time periods. So this isn't something to be taken literally, like, oh man, the Viking axe was the most powerful. Now, obviously, a ballista is more powerful than a Viking axe. But we're talking about time periods, and what do we identify with that?
was a crucial weapon and tool for the Norse warriors of the Viking Age. It was a versatile tool used for chopping wood, as well as a deadly weapon in combat. Viking axes had a single-handed design with a relatively short handle, allowing for quick and agile strikes in battle. These axes were integral to Viking warfare.
Mike from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I love it. So axes were obviously not just used by the Vikings. I can think of a very specific example from not long after this time period, when you have Robert the Bruce riding out onto the battlefield with an axe, a one-handed axe, and killing an enemy nobleman by kind of raising up and bringing it down right on his head, and he broke his axe in the process. And that's a very memorable moment from the Scottish Wars of Independence.
Providing warriors with a reliable and effective weapon on the battlefield. In the 10th century, the longship was the most powerful weapon. The longship or longboat was a type of ship used by the Vikings for trade, exploration, and warfare during the Viking Age. It was long and narrow, designed for speed and agility, with a shallow draft that allowed it to navigate rivers as well as open seas.
And this is why they're able to make these Viking raids. And, we think a lot about Viking raids hitting like the eastern shore of Britain, but they were hitting Paris. They were all the way down in parts of the Byzantine Empire. They were raiding absolutely everywhere.
Long ships were clinker-built, with overlapping planks held together by iron rivets. They were propelled by oars and a single square sail, making them highly maneuverable. In the 11th century, the battering ram was the most powerful weapon. The battering ram was a siege weapon used to break down the doors or walls of fortifications during ancient and medieval warfare. It typically consisted of a large, heavy beam with a metal head, sometimes shaped like a ram's head.
And you see the roof there. That's obviously to protect the guys. If you're pushing one of these rams up against the castle, they're dropping things down, or they're firing crossbows and things like that. That's how Richard the Lionheart ended up dying, was that he was up too close to a castle and he got shot by a cook with a crossbow that hit him right kind of at the base of the neck. And so you've got to protect the guys that are operating these things.
Suspended by ropes or chains. The ram would be repeatedly swung or thrust against the target until it gave way. Battering rams were often mounted on wheeled frames to allow for easier maneuverability, and were used in conjunction with other siege engines and tactics to breach enemy defenses. In the 12th century, the siege tower was the most powerful weapon. The siege tower was a massive, multi-story structure on wheels, used to approach and scale the walls of fortifications during medieval sieges.
So you see how many of these are focused on dealing with siege warfare. The power of castles and walled cities. Most of human history, that's how cities have been protected, is with walls. It's only been with the advent of significant artillery and air power that walls became completely irrelevant.
It housed soldiers who could engage defenders from its elevated platforms and featured ladders or drawbridges to access the battlements. Siege towers played a pivotal role in overcoming fortified defenses, allowing attackers to breach walls and enter enemy strongholds.
When you've got walls that are so thick that the technology of the day can't break through it, like you're not breaking it down with a giant boulder, you're not breaking it down with any of the conventional weapons, the thing you got to do is go up and over it somehow.
In the 13th century, the trebuchet was the most powerful weapon. The trebuchet, a medieval siege weapon, used a counterweight mechanism to propel projectiles. It was highly effective in breaching fortifications due to its ability to launch heavy objects over long distances with great force.
Yeah, a great example of this is, again, during the Scottish Wars of Independence. You have Edward I of England, Longshanks, building this one when they were sieging, I think, Stirling Castle. It's called Warwolf. And it took them months to build this thing, because this is not the kind of weapon that you take with you when your army is traveling to invade a country. You build it on site while you're laying siege, and that one took months to build.
The trebuchet played a significant role in medieval warfare, especially in sieges, where it was used to target walls, buildings, and defenders. In the 14th century, the crossbow was the most powerful weapon. The crossbow, a medieval ranged weapon, features a horizontal bow mounted on a stock. Its design allowed for greater power and accuracy.
And again, we're talking about a weapon that's been around for several centuries at this point. It's not new to the 14th century. As I said earlier, you have Richard the Lionheart in the end of the 12th century being killed with a crossbow.
Compared to traditional bows, making it popular among infantry and knights. The crossbow played a pivotal role in battles and sieges, providing soldiers with a lethal means to engage enemies from a distance.
It's not as distant as, say, like a Welsh longbow would be, but at closer ranges, you can really pack a punch, because this is the kind of thing that could put a bolt right through armor. It's going to have more draw, more power. I forget what the word that you use there, but a human can only put so much tension on something to release it. You can get a lot more power behind a crossbow bolt, but it's not going to have the distance.
In the 15th century, the longbow was the most powerful weapon. The longbow is a type of bow that is tall, roughly equal to the height of the person who uses it, allowing for a long draw length and therefore more power and greater range compared to shorter bows. It played a significant role in medieval warfare, particularly in the battles of the 100 Years' War between England and France.
So, longbow plays a huge role at the Battle of Agincourt, where most of the English army is made up of bowmen. And you have a situation where they're able to funnel all of the French knights, their cavalry, their infantry into a small space and just shower them with arrows. And the bow is going to be significant even as we're getting into the 15th century, where you're starting to have gunpowder, you're starting to have giant cannons. Artillery is starting to become a thing in terms of the modern concept of artillery, where you have a projectile being fired using gunpowder, but it can't be done rapidly. And even when you have guns on the battlefield, bows can be reloaded much quicker. A person can be trained to use those. They can be more accurate.
Longbows were used by English and Welsh archers to devastating effect, able to penetrate armor and reach long distances, making them a formidable weapon on the battlefield. In the 16th century, the arquebus was the most powerful weapon. The arquebus was an early firearm that appeared in the 15th century and was used until the 17th century.
Very inaccurate, very slow to load, but if you could get some of these massed on a target, you could cause some damage.
It was a long-barreled gun with a matchlock mechanism, making it one of the first firearms to have a trigger. The arquebus was effective against armor at short range, but it was slow to reload and often inaccurate.
Right.
Despite its limitations, it played a significant role in changing the nature of warfare, leading to the decline of traditional melee combat and the rise of firearms on the battlefield. In the 17th century, the musket was the most powerful weapon. The musket, a shoulder-fired firearm, emerged in the 16th century and evolved from the arquebus. It became a staple of warfare from the 17th to the 19th centuries, used by infantry in massed formations. Muskets were muzzle-loaded, smooth-bore firearms initially operated by matchlock, then flintlock, and later percussion cap mechanisms.
Yeah, so the percussion cap, which is very common in things like the American Civil War, that's just basically the thing that's going to cause the spark that's going to ignite the gunpowder. Muzzle loading meant it was slow because you had a multi-step process to reload, and even in the best conditions, you could get off maybe 3 shots in a minute. But once you start to get into the 19th century and you start getting breech loaders, which load from this side, you can be a lot faster with your loading. And then, of course, you get rifles by the time you get into the 18th century.
In the 18th century, the artillery was the most powerful weapon. In the 18th century, artillery underwent significant advancements, with various types of cannons being the primary artillery weapons used. These cannons included smoothbore muzzle loading guns of different calibers and sizes, such as field guns, siege guns, and naval guns. They were mounted on carriages for mobility, used in massed formations to deliver devastating volleys of fire, and played a crucial role in shaping the tactics and outcomes of battles during this period.
And during this period, you're primarily dealing with solid shot. So, pretty common to have like a 6-pounder. So not real big, but you put a 6-pound iron ball in a cannon and you fire it at massed troops, because remember, this is the time period when you're using muskets, which aren't particularly accurate. And so the idea was to mass your troops by having everybody shoulder to shoulder, because the massed firepower is how you had an impact. It wasn't about aim and accuracy and things like that. And so think of it as rock, paper, scissors. You have massed infantry that can take out other massed infantry, but it can be defeated by firing giant solid shots that can mow through 3 or 4 lines of troops. You see portrayals of this, things like The Patriot, which is not a particularly historical movie, but in their kind of fictional portrayal of the Battle of Camden, you see where they fire a solid shot and it bounces off the ground and it comes up and just takes a guy's head off. That's absolutely what it would have done, and it might have taken out 3 guys behind him too.
In the 19th century, the Maxim gun was the most powerful weapon. The Maxim gun was the first recoil-operated machine gun, invented by Sir Hiram Maxim in the late 19th century. It was a fully automatic weapon that used the energy from the recoil to eject spent cartridges, reload, and fire continuously. The Maxim gun was a game-changer in warfare, providing a high rate of fire and sustained firepower that could suppress enemy positions effectively. It played a significant role in colonial warfare and World War I.
Yeah, so you have here in the U.S. People talk about the Gatling gun, but that was a different kind of mechanism. That wasn't something. The Maxim is really kind of the father of the modern machine gun, and it's this type of weapon that's going to be used so devastatingly on World War I battlefields and make assaults just devastating in terms of the casualties. But still, the main killer in World War I is artillery. But this is later 19th century. We're starting to deal with these kinds of weapons as you get into the 1870s and 1880s.
Influencing the development of modern machine guns. In the 20th and 21st century, the nuclear weapons was the most powerful weapon. Nuclear weapons are explosive devices that derive their destructive force from nuclear reactions, either fission, splitting of atomic nuclei, or a combination of fission and fusion, the joining of atomic nuclei. These weapons release immense amounts of energy in the form of a nuclear explosion, causing widespread destruction and long-term environmental effects such as radioactive fallout. They have been used twice in warfare, during the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II.
Okay, so the one thing I would say about that is, yes, most powerful, certainly, but most effective, no, because it's only been used just those 2 times over the period of a couple of days. Really, you're talking about air power being the big game changer in this time period. And I would probably argue as well that if we want to really nitpick about most powerful weapons of, say, the 19th century, you probably have to talk about naval warfare with some of the weapons that were mounted on Navy ships. But honestly, as I said earlier, this is not really about what was necessarily the most powerful weapon of every century. This is really more of a discussion about the evolution of warfare. And it's kind of a surface level thing, but we can go much deeper into these topics and talk about these things. But I thought it was interesting. I thought it was something new. What would you have added? What would you have changed that didn't get talked about from any of these time periods? Let me know in the comment section below, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching.